Last week in Michigan politics, calls to tone down the political rhetoric in America, following what officials are investigating as an assassination attempt against former President Donald Trump. What local groups are saying we must do next. Plus, the Democratic presidential ticket was all in on Michigan this week, seemingly, with both the president and vice president making stops in our state to spread their message. We have reports from both visits. And as the state is set to receive over $1 billion to help the opioid epidemic, some are concerned over how the state is using the money. I'm Josh Alburtus, and this is your 13 on Your Side Rundown. And we begin with the news out of Butler, Pennsylvania over the weekend. Shots fired at a rally in what authorities are now investigating as an attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump. Many across the political spectrum now calling for rhetoric to be toned down in the aftermath. We spoke with local groups who are highlighting civil discourse as an alternative to violence. Shock and a rare political pause for many across the world after shots were fired at a campaign rally for former President Donald Trump over the weekend. A scene that left the suspected gunman and at least one rally-goer dead and multiple injured, including the former president. The Secret Service now investigating it as an attempted assassination, a narrative that sparked calls for a shift in political rhetoric.
The terrible tragedy from this past weekend is just a reminder that, our democracy is based on votes and not violence, and we need people to respect the rule of law and respect each other, and certainly we need our politicians to engage in productive civil discourse.
For Dr. Lisa Perhamus at Grand Valley State's Center for Civil Discourse, she says things have changed in recent years.
It used to be that people disagreed with each other's ideas. And more we are seeing people disagreeing with each other as human beings instead of just their ideas.
But she said civil discourse remains a key alternative.
How we talk with one another impacts how we live together.
While things may seem uncertain, Perhamus laid out things the community can do in their own conversations. Things including self-examining to steady yourself and not make assumptions about others, regulating your emotions, and using group agreements to keep a conversation within the boundaries that everyone has agreed to.
Neither one of us are probably going to change our ideas, right? But we will have a better understanding of where the other person is coming from, why they believe what they believe, and that authenticity goes a long way to restoring trust in relationships. And one thing we saw epitomized this weekend in the violence is there's a broken trust.
And following the assassination attempt against former President Trump, U.S. Representative Bill Huizenga is calling for the director of the Secret Service to resign. In a statement posted to Facebook, he said in part, quote, "I have no faith in her ability to lead the Secret Service given the absolute failure this past weekend. Her immediate resignation is only the beginning of what must happen." And he went on to say that former President Trump was less than an inch away from being assassinated on her watch. The director is now being subpoenaed by Congress to testify. That's expected to happen on Monday. And amid the aftermath of the shooting, the Republican National Convention went on as planned in Milwaukee this week. At the same time, on this side of Lake Michigan, Vice President Kamala Harris made a campaign stop in West Michigan to push back on the newly formed Republican ticket. We were there and heard from both sides.
I'm excited to be here to see the Vice President. I support her. I like the work that she does, and I just wanted to come here and hear what she had to speak on today and to continue to support the campaign.
Hundreds of supporters gathering in Kalamazoo Wednesday as Vice President Kamala Harris touched down in West Michigan. Headlining her speech and discussion was an issue top of mind for many Michiganders.
One of the ideas and one of the principles that is at stake in this election is the issue of reproductive freedom.
It's an issue that's been a rallying cry for Democratic messaging, galvanizing supporters to a degree few others have.
I think that, first of all, on this issue, Most people believe that one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree the government should not be telling her what to do with her body.
The vice president also speaking to gun violence and the state of political discourse in America, following what officials are investigating as an assassination attempt against former President Donald Trump in Pennsylvania on Saturday.
There must be unity around the idea that while our nation's history has been scarred by political violence, violence is never acceptable.
The event coming at a key juncture, not only for the direction of the nation following the shooting, but also for her campaign, when some within the party have called for her running mate, President Joe Biden, to step off the ticket.
I voted for him in 2020 and I was proud to, but he's supposed to be a bridge to the future. He needs to pass the torch, the nomination, to someone younger with new ideas that can beat Trump. Because my biggest fear is if he stays at the top of the ballot, Alyssa Slotkin's going to lose. It's going to be a wipeout.
But amid such calls and this week's Republican National Convention in Milwaukee, she and her allies trying to draw contrast to the former president's campaign and that of his new running mate, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance.
The truth of the matter is, J.D. Vance and certainly Donald Trump are wrong for America.
But Republicans responding with this statement. Quote, Michiganders will see a sharp contrast between Vice President Harris and J.D. Vance this week quite clearly. Kamala Harris is an out-of-touch California elite who has wrecked everything she has touched during her tenure as vice president. Her visit will highlight all the reasons why the Biden-Harris agenda is wrong for Michigan: open borders, skyrocketing inflation, and the destruction of our auto jobs. And just one day before the shooting, President Joe Biden made his way to Detroit to convince voters he's up for the job, as some Democrats have been calling for him to drop out of the race. We were there and recap his visit. Here in Detroit, the influence of Democratic politics in the city that's considered to be the backbone of the party in this critical swing state is evident. For voters like Donna Harper, she's ready to stand up for that reputation amid a visit from President Joe Biden.
I support President Biden because of his values. I feel we have shared values. I feel he's a fair, just politician.
The president on Friday attempting to draw a contrast between his message and what he sees as the message of former President Donald Trump.
This race is about your family. It's about your freedom. It's about democracy. Are you with me? Are we going to stop Donald Trump? Let's get this done.
Detroit's Wayne County backing then Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden by almost 40 points just 4 years ago. And for one of his biggest campaign surrogates, voters here backing Governor Gretchen Whitmer by an even wider margin 2 years ago. Now, amid growing concerns and calls for the president to exit the race, Harper remains supportive.
From my neighbors and from my friends, we're still in line with Biden because we don't feel one misstep, one bad debate is a reason to throw him overboard.
But not everyone in this key battleground state is convinced.
I was going to suck it up and vote for Biden. But when I saw him in the debate, I think it would be reckless to vote for him.
Tom Moran traveled an hour from Fenton to voice his view. He told us he's voted for Democratic presidential candidates for 50 years, but said this time he can't do it.
I voted for him in 2020 and I was proud to, but he's supposed to be a bridge to the future. He needs to pass the torch, the nomination, to someone younger with new ideas that can beat Trump. Because my biggest fear is if he stays at the top of the ballot, Alyssa Slotkin's going to lose. It's going to be a wipeout.
On the state's west side, Representative Hillary Scholten fighting to keep her seat in a key swing district, joining a growing list of congressional Democrats calling on Biden to drop out of the race. The president on Friday, however, reiterating a commitment to staying in the race.
You probably noticed there's a lot of speculation lately. What's Joe Biden going to do? Is he going to stay in the race? Is he going to drop out? Here's my answer. I am running and we're going to win. I'm not going to change that.
Even taking issue with some coverage of his public appearances.
They've been hammering me because I sometimes confuse names. I say that's Charlie instead of Bill. But guess what? Donald Trump has gotten a free pass.
The president seemingly aiming to reassure voters like Harper, who said she would be in attendance, that he can continue, and signal to his party he will be their nominee. Following the president's visit, we're looking into some of the claims he made while he was here. Coming up, we verify some of what Biden had to say at the rally that came at a key time for his campaign. Back in April, we fact-checked some of the claims former President Trump made when we covered his visit to Grand Rapids. Now that we covered President Biden's visit in Detroit last Friday, we verify some of what the current president had to say. Well, in a fiery speech, perhaps meant to push back on some of those calls for him to exit the race, President Biden touched on issues from the economy to the border. But just how true were those claims? Let's verify. Our sources include the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the Department of Homeland Security, and reporting from our colleagues at ABC News. First, let's dig into what Biden had to say about Michigan specifically in terms of how many jobs he says he added here.
390,000 of those jobs right here in Michigan.
We can verify that that claim is true. From the month he took office up into the preliminary jobs report from last month, the Bureau of Labor Statistics showed an employment number growth of just under 400,000 jobs in our state. But when we broaden it out, Biden also spoke to job numbers nationwide.
Since I became president, we've created nearly 16 million new jobs nationwide.
This claim needs some context. It is true that since the January that Biden took office, over 15 million jobs were added to the economy. But the context here is the big drop off that happened in the year before he took office due to the coronavirus pandemic. This has led many to dispute that a lot of those jobs under Biden were rebound jobs that came as the pandemic backed off. When it came to the border, the president had this to say about the executive action he took early last month after Congress was unable to agree on their own deal.
So that's when I took executive action. I said, and since I did, the border encounters have gone down over 50%.
The acting CBP commissioner has since publicly stated that encounters at the southern border had fallen by more than 50% in the last 6 weeks. The president also criticized statements made by the former president, including this one.
He says if he loses, there will be a bloodbath.
Former President Donald Trump did say that at a campaign rally in Ohio earlier this year, but the context of this statement has been disputed. Where Biden made this comment amidst references to January 6th and the Supreme Court's recent ruling on presidential power, Trump's comments came embedded within a monologue of statements and policies involving the auto industry. He and his team have asserted that that was said in the context of a potential catastrophe for the auto industry. With your Verify, I'm Josh Alburtus. Michigan is set to collect a total of over $1 billion to help with the opioid epidemic. But how exactly to use it has become a point of contention. Why there's some frustration about how the state is using some of that money, that's next. We return with continuing coverage on opioid settlement money and frustrations over how they're being used in our state. Michigan will get $1.6 billion by 2040 to help fight the opioid epidemic. 13 on your side's Julie Koharic has been on this story for months and brings us the latest.
Every 4 hours,
one person in Michigan dies of opioid overdose alone.
A toll ticking up as the clock winds down on the money that could help stop it.
Put politics and departmental strife aside.
Dr. Kara Poland,
do the right thing for the state of Michigan,
spends every day trying to slow that down. But there is nothing about Poland that moves slowly.
I am one of the first 20 fellowship trained and board certified addiction medicine specialists in the United States.
A leader in the field and the state, heading up the Michigan Opioid Advisory Commission since it was created by the state legislature in 2022. But inside the commission, a standstill.
To be clear, we're hearing nothing from the opioid task force.
That task force, a completely separate one formed by the governor's office.
Every region of the state is represented.
It's led by Dr. Natasha Bagdasarian, the state's chief medical executive.
We're really talking to people who are either working on these issues on a day-to-day basis or people who have lived experience.
Dr. Bagdasarian presented their spending plan at a meeting in February, but Dr. Poland says it was decided without the OAC's input. In fact, that meeting was the first they'd gotten a hold of it.
It was disappointing to receive the information at the same time as everyone else because the Opioid Advisory Commission has committed to collaboration.
When I asked Dr. Bagdasarian about these concerns, she pointed to a recent membership expansion in the task force.
So there was a little gap when we were reforming this group of individuals. So during that time period, it is possible that there were some perceived issues with communication.
She disagrees with the accusations, saying their meetings are public and that all the data they can release is already on their website.
We have an obligation to the people of Michigan to make sure that any outside body who is asking for confidential data, patient identifier data, anything that is not yet publicly available, that we have data use agreements and things like that in place.
Dr. Poland says she hasn't been able to get a hold of Dr. Bagdasarian, the data they're looking for, or the funds the OAC needs to do their job.
However, without dialogue, it's impossible to do so.
They requested money to complete a needs assessment required by the 2022 state law that formed the commission.
Majority of the members
the state speeding up their spending.
Is adopted.
At the end of June, the legislature passing the state budget with more than $48 million allocated to fight the opioid epidemic. That's actually more than double what the opioid task force planned for in February. But that extra $25 million still does not include money for the OAC.
Being able to do our job requires that funding, and being able to support the citizens of Michigan requires the ability to see what the communities are asking for, what the data shows.
With time ticking down before the next round of spending, Poland is back to square one, working to get it into a supplemental package.
If, however, it is not funded at all this budget period, I think that what the OAC has heard from the public is that they are concerned about how this money is being appropriated.
Despite disagreements, both groups can agree this money and how it's spent is crucial.
This is time limited, and so we have to use it to really make the biggest impacts that we can now.
The crisis has claimed the lives of more than 13,000 Michiganders since 2019, making this funding deeply personal to many, including Dr. Poland.
Already on my way to being an addiction physician when my brother died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound secondary to his alcohol use disorder. And I always tell people that turned it from something I did as a job to something that I do as a passion.
She knows no amount of money could reverse time and bring back her loved ones. But this money could stop someone else from feeling the pain she deals with every day. Until then, she won't stop pushing for transparency.
The money is not forever, so this money will run out.
Until time,
we can do better,
runs out.
And just this week, Kent County is approving a plan on how to spend millions of those opioid settlement dollars to address the crisis. From now until 2038, Kent County will receive nearly $12 million. 13 on your side's Micah Cho explains how those funds will be spent.
Jury of 16 yeas, 1 nay, the resolution is adopted.
The controversial budget and plan to fund opioid treatment opportunities in Kent County has come to a close for now. The delay in a decision comes after a 100-person task force had yet to come to an agreement on how to spend the money. One of those people, Jonathan Stoltman, director of the Opioid Policy Institute and a volunteer on the Kent County Opioid Task Force. While he weighed in on some of the decision-making, Stoltman said he was against the passing of the final budget Thursday morning.
The most vulnerable people in Grand Rapids, it seemed like their voices were not included in that process, and that remains really concerning for me.
Through 2038, Kent County will allocate over $19 million towards opioid treatment and harm reduction. And here's a breakdown on how some of that money will be spent over the next 2 years $800,000 will be spent for jail-based treatment programs, $60,000 for distribution of naloxone, and $20,000 for tools like fentanyl test strips. What that funding does not cover, however, is other harm reduction tools like syringes that will help stop the spread of diseases, something Stolten says organizations around the country could have used.
The fact that for these first 2 years they didn't give any money to needles or syringe service programs is in itself a really big reflection of the priorities.
However, Jenny James from the county's administration office said Thursday afternoon there are other funding streams for things like syringes and needles.
Currently, the state of Michigan and the city of Grand Rapids have invested in that particular service through the RED project. So we did not include that in this plan since those two funding sources we're supporting.
In a statement, Rachel Jantz, epidemiologist and co-chair of the Kent County Opioid Task Force, explained the decision-making for each category by saying in part, quote, "The decisions on how to spend the settlement funds were carefully considered with an eye toward increasing investments in evidence-based programs with past success and beginning to invest in new strategies."
We're also following a lawsuit filed this week that seeks to close several voter registration sites in Michigan. The Republican National Committee, the Trump campaign, and others filed the suit claiming that VA hospitals and Small Business Administration offices are being used unlawfully as voter registration sites. The lawsuit claims that Governor Gretchen Whitmer illegally issued an executive order allowing multiple VA hospitals to become registration sites in 2023. And then in 2024, Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson allegedly made an illegal agreement with the United States Small Business Administration to use some of its offices as other registration sites. The lawsuit claims that only the Michigan legislature has the power to declare new registration sites and seeks to have these sites closed and invalidated. Millions of dollars could be coming back to homeowners in Kent County. When we come back, how some whose properties have been foreclosed on could be seeing what, for some, could be much needed financial relief. About $2 million could be coming back to homeowners in Kent County whose properties have been foreclosed on. This will apply to those whose property was sold for more than what was owed in taxes. 13 on Your Side's Micah Cho is back and breaks down the story.
If I sell the property for more than what is owed, or any county treasurer sells the property in an auction for more than what's owed due to lack of not paying property taxes, that excess dollars now under the new law can be claimed by previous parcel owners.
Michigan counties are no longer able to keep excess funds made from foreclosure auctions. According to County Treasurer Peter McGregor, Michigan statute allowed counties to do so, but not anymore.
Anybody who has a interest in a parcel and we foreclose on it, that they can file a claim for those excess proceeds if we sell it for more than what is owed on the unpaid delinquent taxes.
And according to McGregor, the county has been preparing to pay back those excess funds as a result of a settlement agreement made last week, adding it won't come out of their general fund.
There's money set aside, and it possibly could be close to or up to, I would say, $2.6 million.
The class action lawsuit involved 43 Michigan counties and had more than 3,300 claims made. Attorneys Ron Ryans, Owen Ramey, and James Shack say there's more than $43 million that could be given back to Michigan property owners. Cooley Law School professor Michael McDaniel says the past process of counties keeping excess foreclosure funds violated the Fifth Constitutional Amendment.
Specifically, your Fifth Amendment right that private property, your property, cannot be taken for a public purpose without due compensation. And you're alleging that there is not due compensation being paid because the county is keeping the surplus.
And that's the rundown for your week in Michigan politics. Be sure to keep up with all the top political stories of the day, both on air and online at 13onyourside.com. We'll see you next week.